All right, welcome back to Close Up. No question about it, the inauguration of Donald Trump certainly generated plenty of emotion all across the spectrum. But for one man in particular, the moment had to be especially personal. Joined now by the creator of the Trump campaign, New Hampshire's Corey Lewandowski. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be home.
So what was that like, sitting there, watching him take the oath of office, knowing where you guys started?
It was really humbling. You know, you put 2 years of your life into something, and then you see a culmination of really not just changing the country, but maybe changing the whole world to look at things differently. And I think when we started this project in January of 2015, no one really assumed that A, he was a real candidate, or B, he had the opportunity to win. And you know, for the 18 months I spent with Mr. Trump every day, we knew there was something special happening. And you know, January, his swearing in was really, really special.
Was it tough to watch too, knowing that you departed right before the convention? Any more you want to talk about as far as the reason for that departure? And I mean, did you feel like
Here's the great thing, right? I have a great relationship with the president, and there are so few people who can say the president of the United States is actually one of their friends, and he's a friend of mine. And I've had a high privilege of, you know, after I left the campaign, I still travel with him on the campaign. I had the privilege of talking with him on many times. I had the privilege, which very few people had, of sitting on the platform when the president of the United States was sworn in. Pretty cool, really cool, looking out at the crowd saying, I had a very small role in helping make this happen. And you know, being in Washington and participating in the balls and all the things, so many people came up to me and said, thank you for getting this started, thank you for believing. And Donald Trump said he's not, you know, he's the vehicle for the people, and I think I was the vehicle to try and help Donald Trump get on the right path.
From when things started, you first time you walked into Trump Tower, talk about being his campaign manager, to being sworn in. I mean, did you think it was possible a couple of years ago, or did you think that you were just kind of part of a campaign that was more of a movement, but ultimately we're working on the brand of Donald Trump? Because that's what a lot of people assume.
Well, here's the great part. If you look back 2 years ago this very weekend, we were in Iowa at the Iowa Freedom Summit, where we had 15 candidates out talking about them running for president. It was Scott Walker's big breakout speech. No one gave Donald Trump any credit, because that was when Walker first came on board. And then we slowly, meticulously built an operation, and every time we went somewhere, crowds got bigger, more enthusiastic. We saw it here in New Hampshire when we did that event at Steve Stepanak's house, State Representative Stepanak's house, in March, before he even announced. And there was hundreds of people that showed up, and we knew it was real. And if you ask our opponents, you ask the people that campaigned against us in the primary, they knew Donald Trump was going to be the nominee the November before the election, because they knew they couldn't move Donald Trump's people away from him.
You brought up crowd size. Certainly a lot of people are talking about that this week. Why does this matter? First thing, Sean Spicer comes out, says the media's making it all up, and so more and more people are assuming this guy's an egomaniac that's obsessed with popularity rather than important things.
Here's what you have to understand. The media has been so unfair to this campaign throughout the process, and now to the presidency. What we saw, and look, I know the Times reporter, the Time magazine reporter, who tweeted out that said the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. was removed from the Oval Office. It wasn't removed, but 3,000 media outlets reported that as factually accurate before he said, hey, mea culpa, I made a mistake. We need better journalism. We need people to verify facts. And what we really need, Josh, and you've never been accused of this, is we need reporters who are willing to actually report the news and not be the news. What we see more and more and more is that these reporters actually want to be the news story. They want to write a book about their experience covering Donald Trump. They want to be the narrative that everyone's talking about. That's not what the news business is supposed to be. It's supposed to be to fairly and accurately report the news. If reporters do that, I think Donald Trump will be very happy.
But there's visuals of the crowd size. Why? I mean, are you troubled by the fact that was like such an issue with him early on?
No, I'm not, because you have to remember, right? What's important is making sure that people understand that he is going to bypass the false stories. He's going to go directly to the American people with a Twitter account that has 30 million followers. And what we have seen is that there is a massive bias in the media. And all he wants to do is have a fair shake, a fair chance. And what I say is, let's give him 100 days. Let's let everyone come together for 100 days to see if we can actually move the country in the right direction. What we've seen the first week, massive movement, more movement than anybody thought possible, because he's a guy who gets things done.
Is he going to be able to stay focused and not get distracted by the criticisms? Because they're going to keep coming. There's no way of avoiding it. I mean, he's a controversial president. He's making controversial moves already. The president of Mexico is not coming here. Seems to alienate one of our neighbors already. Is he going to be able to stay focused and not be too far, outside the margins, worried about what the media says about this and things that don't matter.
He's completely focused, and if you look at the campaign promises he's made for the last 18 months, he's implementing them in the first week. Nobody thought this was possible. He's putting executive orders in place. He's already said we're going to build the wall. He's already talked about immigration reform. He's talked about a number of things, which he talked about directly in the campaign. And what people don't understand, and this is what the media miss when we had these massive crowds, they would hone in on one small sentence that the president-elect or the candidate at the time made and forget about all the good other things that he was doing. That's what they've missed right now. So they're focusing on one small aspect, and they're missing all the executive orders and all the work he's doing, repeal and replace Obamacare, cut taxes. Those are the big picture things, but the media wants to focus on one sentence that he may or may not have said that's 100% accurate.
Yeah, I wonder, a lot of people speculate this in the media. Does he do it on purpose to distract from something else? I mean, this is a president who's now in the White House who never showed the tax returns. That was the biggest deal in 2012 with Mitt Romney. He didn't wind up doing it. So much other to talk about.
Look, what has previously been done is not a prelude to what will be done in the future. Fundamental and wholesale changes come to Washington. Washington is completely upside down. What they don't understand about the president is that he works 20 hours a day. He can get more done in one day than most presidents will do in a week. He demands the very best from his staff. What he says is, this is what my goals are. I want you to go and implement them. Washington isn't used to this. He's not willing to give these guys a break. He's going to make Congress move on his agenda because he has a mandate coming in with 306 electoral votes in states that Republicans don't normally win.
Let's say he gives you a call, and maybe he already has, I don't know. Say he calls you up and says, Corey, what do you think of the first week? What do you tell him?
Look, I tell him it was unbelievably successful. I think he has fulfilled many of the campaign promises. Is there a lot more work to do? Of course there is, but if you look back holistically at what he's been able to achieve in the first week sitting behind that Resolute desk, it is unparalleled to any president in modern history.
Well, what did he, I mean, he signed executive orders, sure. What can you point to and say first week achievement?
Look, you know what he's done? He's ridding the bureaucracy from the bureaucrats who've destroyed our country. Look at the State Department. We've got these, here's what I see the mainstream media say. They've got 160 years of combined federal government experience. That's the problem with our country. They don't get anything done. These are the people who are responsible for Benghazi. And you know what he's come in? He said, look, I want everyone's resignation. You know what he said to the diplomats living overseas, our ambassador? He says, guys, there's no more free passes. Everyone's resignation gets accepted, and we're going to put new people in place. What we've seen in the top 5 levels of the government inside the administration, from President Trump to Steve Bannon to Jared Kushner to Kellyanne Conway, zero federal government experience. That's what the American people voted for. That's what brings fundamental and wholesale change. That's what he needs to do, and that's what he's going to do.
And that's what a lot of people like about his cabinet pick so far. So what about you? I mean, so now you're in Washington, D.C., but you're commuting back and forth to New Hampshire. What are your plans? Do you have your own consulting company, Avenue Strategies?
Yeah, so we put together a small firm that really has 2 main goals. One is we're going to go and look at U.S. Senate candidates, Republicans, who are running in what are traditionally blue states that have a Democrat incumbent senator. A state like Ohio with Sherrod Brown, who's probably going to be an obstacle to the Trump agenda. I think we can be very helpful in recruiting and then helping those Republican primary candidates in those races win there by putting the Trump coalition together. That's a big part of it, because if you look at the map moving forward, Republicans have a great opportunity in 2018 to expand their Senate majority. The second part is, and people knock me for this all the time, what I want to do is I want to help companies grow. Falls directly in line with what the Trump agenda is. So people will say, is your firm a Republican firm? Is it a Democrat firm? Is it a bipartisan firm? I said, it's none of those things. I built a new model. It's a Trump firm. You know what that means? If you're not on the Trump agenda, which is growing jobs in this country, we don't want to represent you. They say, well, hold on, we're going to be a paying client. I don't care about paying clients. I want to have companies that want to invest in our country right now, grow jobs, grow the economy, help reduce taxes, understand the burdens that the government has on them, and rid them of some of those. The federal bureaucracy has been closed for business for way too long. It's time to make them open up and help our country grow.
By calling your firm a Trump firm, though, aren't you concerned that's going to raise or repeat the criticisms that, he's cashing in on the relationship that he had and too close to the White House?
Look, 2 years ago, when my best friend said to me, I've committed career suicide by going to work for Donald Trump, right? And they said, you'll never work in Republican Party politics again. I don't think my goal was to go and start a firm that cashes in with the administration. That's not what I'm looking to do. But what I do know is I got a phone call from a small company in Lowell, Massachusetts. They said, the Department of Labor is killing us. We're going to go out of business. Can you help us get an answer? We've been on hold for 9 months. I said, I don't know if I can get you an answer, if it's a yes or a no. It's not for me to weigh in, but let's just get you an answer one way or the other. This is a firm that employs 280 people in Lowell, Massachusetts, probably my relatives or friends of my relatives, because that's where I grew up. We got to get the government more responsive. Here's an amazing story, Josh. I tried to set up the small business over the Christmas holiday, between Christmas and New Year's. I called the IRS. They said, we can't issue you an employment identification number for 12 days. I said, excuse me? They said, no, we're closed for issuing small business, any business, an employment identification number. So not one company was started through the IRS for a 12-day window because they were closed for business. I called the president-elect. I said, can you believe this? He said, no. We're going to be open for business. We're going to make sure our government is now functioning so that we can grow businesses, small and large businesses. It's a completely different mindset that has been brought to Washington.
I have to check into that. About a minute to go. Obviously, you're excited, you're fired up about your firm, you're working in Washington. Any part of you wishing that you're in the West Wing?
You know, there's always that small part that says, hey, it'd be really cool to be inside. And yesterday, I guess a couple days ago, was the maiden voyage on Air Force One. Probably pretty cool to be on that airplane. And I think someday maybe I'll have the privilege. But you know what I've got to do is, I want to help the administration from the outside. And I think I can do more from being on the outside to help the administration get their agenda done in Congress by holding elected officials accountable, bringing grassroots pressure, and helping expand that majority. You can't do that from the inside. There are some real strict rules and regulations when you're inside the administration, so I'm very pleased to be on the outside.
And no book coming out anytime soon?
No book from me.
All right. Good to see you. Congratulations on everything.
Appreciate it.
All right. We'll be right back with a look at what the Attorney General had to say this week about the president's claim of massive voter fraud. I forgot to ask you about that. Anyway, during the election, stay with us.